Hello! Like the title of the video says, we are going to be covering healing skills and their targeting mechanics in New World. Now, this at first glance might seem a little simplistic, but if anybody has kind of dived into the settings menus and kind of played around with it, it actually ends up being a little bit more complicated than you might immediately suspect. So that's what this is going to be about. It is going to be an in-depth guide to how these mechanics work, some of the nuances to them, some of the weird buggy natures of them, and just in general how to properly utilize them to get the most out of the systems that we currently have in the game. Before we get into that, I want to talk about the skills themselves. I'm not going to go over, anything like how much they heal for, healing per second, or anything like that. What I want to talk about is how they target. So there are two main groups for your healing skills. There are 6 total healing skills and 2 main groups. 3 abilities belong to the cannot be locked on or cannot be targeted, and 3 belong to the can be targeted groups. So let's talk about the ones that can't actually utilize the targeting mechanic for healers. That is first going to be Splash of Light. Whenever you use Splash of Light, it's a point blank area of effect. It goes through walls, it goes through mountains, it goes all the way up to 100 meters, but it does not affect all allies. It only affects your group members, so whoever is currently in the group with you. This is sort of like an important targeting mechanic, so I'll go ahead and mention it. We have Orb of Protection. This is very similar to like a light attack. You basically send out a projectile, it hits an ally or an enemy, and it will apply a protection to whatever ally is nearest that enemy. You also have Beacon. Beacon's a little bit different, a little bit weird. It fires out very similarly as sort of like a light attack. However, it will attach to whatever it hits. So if you hit the ground, it will attach to the ground and be a dome of healing around there. If you hit an ally, it will follow that ally around. If you hit an enemy, it will actually follow that enemy around. So a weird kind of targeting nuance to the skill, but it makes it very, very flexible and very efficient. Like, you usually get a lot of value out of your beacon cast. Now from there, we're gonna go and talk about our targeted healing skills, and there are 3 of them. We have Divine Embrace, we have Light's Embrace. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to be talking about them as the Embrace skills collectively. They are almost identical in how they mechanically work. They just have a little bit of nuance to how the actual healing amounts go through, but for targeting, it doesn't really matter. And then we have Sacred Ground. Sacred Ground is going to be kind of nuanced, kind of different from the Embrace skills. So we are going to kind of talk about how those work a little bit. For the remainder of the video, we will not be referencing these other skills that I referenced as not being able to be locked on, because they don't really apply to this system. So let's go ahead and take a look at what these skills look like when you use them. So whenever you cast, they will appear at your cursor, just like so, and you can cast them. So, there you go. I cast it at that area. Now, keeping in mind, the first of your Embrace skills actually has a very long cast time. Let's talk about cast times. Whenever you cast an ability, there's actually 2 stages. There's the initial stage where you actually pull up your staff, and then when you press the button again, it sort of like confirms your cast. This is very similar in like MOBAs. You have the quick casting feature where it basically disregards this initial cast phase. Now, there are ways to do that for these spells that are not maybe readily apparent, but we'll talk about them later. Now, keep in mind that from here, if I press Q, I can't press E or R to fire off the spell. Right? Now, if I press R, I can't press Q or E to fire off the spell. There's some weird buggy nuances with that as well that we'll talk about in just a second. But now that you kind of have a grasp of what these spells kind of look like, let's actually turn on the targeting system and take our first peek at the settings menu. So we have a number of settings that we can actually play around with here. We have targeted healing, and then you're going to have a bunch of other options that are basically targeted healing dash something something. So think of targeted healing as the on-off switch for turning on the lock-on system for healing. Now keep in mind, this healing only works, or this lock-on system only works for these 3 skills, and it only works for the life staff. So you cannot lock on with a fire staff or an ice gauntlet or a bow or a gun or any of those things using this system. So now that we've turned on targeted healing, there's actually a lot of kind of like weird nuances with how targeting works in general. And it's important to understand these because some of these other options affect those limitations in different ways or can even remove them. So let's talk about those limitations first. So whenever you have a skill and you have this system turned on, if I press this skill, you'll actually see that I lock onto the target and it will follow them around. This does have a maximum range, so if this person continues running away, you'll see that my skill falls onto the ground and now I can kind of move it like I did before. Now I can't lock on another person. It is basically gone. From here I have a couple of options. I can either try to land the spell, you know, like that. I missed because it's very easy to miss these skills. Or you can actually just right click. Now right clicking will cancel your cast, and there is a number of other things that cancel your cast. If you have the ability to run while you're casting, running will cancel your casting, dodging will cancel your casting, blocking will cancel your casting. If you have the ability to auto attack, that will also cancel your lock on. So this lock on or this casting feature is canceled by most of the things you can do. Now you might be wondering, hey, it's kind of weird. Why did you say if you run? Because whenever I have a spell out, I can't run. Well, there's some interesting nuances to some of the other spells that we have. But before we get into those, I want to touch on a couple more things. First of all, whenever you lock on, you can use the mouse wheel up and down to kind of scroll through targets. Now this is fairly basic, but it's important to note. Now if you try to lock on to somebody with this system and it doesn't have line of sight, it'll still try, but then it will immediately break. Now that's why you have this problem sometimes where it basically goes from one person to the next and then you're like, wait, why did it drop? It's because they LOS'd you. LOS can be an issue for targeting. That being said, we can actually lock on and switch targets behind us. This is important because there is a feature that kind of sort of has a problem with this exact mechanic, and we'll talk about that when we get there as well. I think that about covers it for the base lock-on mechanic itself, other than the fact that we have these two buttons underneath a placard. So let's talk about this UI right here. If you lock onto someone, it'll actually have a little placard next to your character that says targeted and then whatever their name is. This is very useful if you're trying to throw it into a group of people and you quickly look down and say, oh, that's not the right guy. Additionally, that white bar should be their HP, so it's a pretty good indicator as to whether or not you have the right person, and you can kind of scroll through and look for people whose bars are lower. You also have two options underneath there. These might look a little foreign to you because I have rebound my keys, but mouse 4, the press to unlock button, is usually middle mouse button, and mouse 5, hold target self, is usually the left alt button. I have moved that to my mouse, but let's go ahead and talk about those first. So if you have an ability that you have locked on, you can actually press this button to manually unlock it. Now before we kind of talked about the fact that you can kind of look away and that will break it, just like so. Instead, you can just click the button and break it. This is a little bit more fluid and you don't have to have that weird kind of jerky like pull off of the character. But it's something to note, and it's going to be very important when we talk about it later, that you cannot lock onto a target after you've broken out. This is similar to, the other instance where if you break out of a lock, you can't go back into the locked state. You actually have to cancel the spell and then relock. Now we can fix that later with one of the options. Finally, what we're going to talk about before we get into all of the different settings is the ability to target yourself. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you why this is important and why there's weird casting steps, if you will. So if you notice, most of your spells, especially the ones that can target things, actually have two stages. You have the first stage, which is I draw my weapon, I lock onto my target, and I do this cool casting animation thing. And then the second phase is I cast the spell, right? Now, when you're trying to heal yourself, you can actually press this button instead to target yourself instead of the person you're currently targeting. Makes sense, right? So I'm going to go ahead and target myself, and you'll see I healed myself. However, you'll notice this is how long it takes to heal myself if I do it in that order. If I instead hold down the self-heal button and then press the button, you'll notice that it is much faster. I skip that initial drawing my hands and doing the cool animation thing. This is even faster if your skill doesn't really have a cast time. So I'll show you what that means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the other Embrace skill, which is an instantly cast spell. It doesn't have that ring around it. You'll see there's like a little ring that says casting. The other Embrace skill doesn't have that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to self-heal myself as fast as possible with that other skill, and you're going to see a big difference here. So this is as fast as I can do it. Now, instead, if I hold down the self-cast and I press the button, boom, it's there. This is important because not only is it faster, but it is less telegraphed. So if you're in PvP and you see someone doing this, that means they're about to cast something and you should hit them, right? Now, instead, if you're self-healing or if you have the ability to lock on and run around, it's going to make it much harder for the enemy to actually read what you're doing and when you're going to do it. And we're going to talk about how you can enable some of those features in a second. So that pretty much covers this, this basic lock-on feature. Now, I know this has been a lot of information, and this is only the first option, but all of the rest of these options are literally just derivatives of the initial system. So don't feel like you're getting overwhelmed. If you've gotten all of this, you're ready for the next step. If you didn't understand everything, just ask me in the comment section below, or rewatch this section of the video and try again, because it is a lot to take in. So just give yourself a second chance and be like, oh, okay. That being said, let's jump into the, I won't say more advanced options, but the more specific options. So the first two options are actually mutually exclusive with each other. You have freeform camera and you have camera aim retargeting. Freeform camera basically makes it to where you can't wiggle off of a target once you lock on. So I can turn around, I can face the other way, I can walk away. As long as I don't LOS them, I maintain my lock on. This is extremely good, and it is extremely versatile for making sure your heals go out even if they move around. You don't have to it's just easier to maintain the lock on. So from there, you can actually switch over and we can go to the camera aim retargeting option. You'll notice you turn one of these on, the other one immediately goes off. So camera aim retargeting again changes the way our camera works when we're locked onto a target. If I try to move my camera, you're going to notice that I actually jump around targets. Now, first of all, kind of like I said earlier, it's kind of not laggy, but there's like a resistance to switching characters. So if you're trying to go through a lot of characters, it takes a while to switch between them. It's not very good. Additionally, it makes it very hard to lock onto people behind you. So I can't really lock onto the person behind me using it. Now, I could just scroll, and lock onto people behind me, but that kind of defeats the point of having this feature where you're just kind of looking around. So in my opinion, the stronger setting, the better setting in 99% of situations is this freeform camera option, and just disregard camera aim retargeting. The one exception I will say to this is if you were somehow playing with a controller or if you have accessibility issues, camera aim retargeting might be a little bit softer, a little bit easier an option for you, even if it's not the most exact or advanced tool. So try both of them out, see what's good for you, but I highly recommend the freeform camera option. Let's go ahead and turn this off. We're going to look at all of these kind of in a vacuum first. So now let's turn on Sticky Lock. Now Sticky Lock at first glance kind of seems bad. What does Sticky Lock do? So Sticky Lock, if I lock onto a person and I cast a spell, it will stay locked onto them. Notice I'm still locked on. Normally, whenever I cast an ability, come down here, Sticky Lock off. Normally, when I cast an ability, I lose that lock on. You notice I lost that lock on. So if you leave sticky targeting on, you'll maintain that lock. Doesn't seem like much. However, there's some interesting mechanics to this. So if I stick on somebody and I dodge, I now retain the ability to dodge while I'm locked onto them. Also notice I'm not in the casting animation anymore, right? So what you see here, let me go ahead and cancel that. Or actually, let me just cast the spell. It doesn't matter. I actually just kind of stay targeting on him, right? I can dodge, I can block, but I have to kind of face him, right? Now, if I get too far away from that facing, like, notice I can still drag myself off. And you're probably thinking exactly what I'm going to say next. If you have this other option, not manually, freeform camera, you're going to have the ability to look away. So let me go ahead and cast this. And now I can look away, I can run, I can dodge, and I can block, all while maintaining that lock on, right? So it's incredibly useful for PvP scenarios where you're getting ran at, people are literally running you down, and you're trying to heal somebody. Also keep in mind, because you're already locked on, your spells don't need that initial cast time. I can immediately heal. I don't have to pull out and telegraph all of my heals. Now the big drawback to this is, if you auto attack, it does drop the lock on. This is the worst part about this. Auto attack does cancel this. It makes it very difficult for you to maintain this, and the reason is because of the way Life Staff works. You have two nodes called Blissful Touch and Revitalize. These abilities both heal allies that they hit, that they go through, and they also, when they hit enemies, reduce your cooldowns for the Life Staff. So Life Staff users, you'll notice, are always auto attacking. So if you're in this environment where you have sticky turned on, auto attacks will still cancel it. Now that being said, there isn't really a detriment to having sticky targeting on most of the time, especially if you're auto attacking anyway. The biggest advantage of sticky targeting is, like I said before, if you're trying to run away and you're in like PvP based combat, you can stay locked onto your friend behind you. So let's take a look at kind of what that looks like. So if you're running around, right, and let's just say someone's chasing me, I can hold down Alt to target myself, heal myself, and then I'm still locked onto my buddy, and I can be like, oh no, he got low, and I can heal him with my other skill, and then heal myself again with my self-target. So it makes it extremely strong at casting abilities in low number PvP, especially 2v2s. The only restriction to it is the fact that you're not going to be able to auto attack the enemy, and you're not going to be able to switch weapons. So sticky targeting is not that great by itself, but when you start stacking some of the other features of the targeting system in with it, it's going to get a lot better. Let's go ahead and turn both of those off, and we're going to talk about manual target lock. Now, in the beginning of the video, you heard me say that if you lock onto a target and then you unbind yourself, that's a one-way street. You can't go back. With this feature, you just press the button again and you'll retarget. Now, this is the reason why I say it's way better to just have freeform camera on, because what I can actually do is I can kind of walk over here and I can be like, nah, him. Nope, him. Over there, him. And I don't have to worry about having this cone in front of me that maintains who I can switch to, and worry about there's like this weird resistance between switching between multiple people. It's just quick and easy, and I can generally pick who I want to lock onto at any given time, right? So hopefully the manual targeting makes sense. It's kind of a straightforward option. Finally, we have group mode. So group mode is really only applicable if you're in a group and you do not want to heal random passerbys, or if you're in war and you're really focusing on healing members of your own party. Now that being said, this only is functional, A, if you're in a group, and B, if you're cycling through targets using the middle mouse wheel. So if you have this option on, cycling through these people would not be possible if you were in a group. That being said, you have to be in a group. So if you're in solo play and you have this option turned on, it doesn't actually do anything. This is only really applicable to me, in my opinion, if you're in a war scenario and your job is to heal like the frontliners and you're like a low HP single target healer and you don't want to have to cycle through the 50 people that are around you. You just want to cycle through those 6 people and get the heals on the people you need to. So group mode can be really good for targeted healing in war scenarios. Other than that, I just recommend turning this option off. So let's talk about what my recommendation for the full kit is. Obviously, I want you guys to play around with these settings for yourself and pick what you think is best for your gameplay, for your style. But these are the options I have found to be the best. Freeform camera gives us the ability to look around. We don't have to worry about aiming at a specific place or a specific time. I want sticky lock so that I can run, dodge, do whatever I want while I'm locked on without having to lose that. The only caveat to that is auto attack, but there's no downside to sticky lock, especially if I have all these other options turned on. And then finally, manually target locking. This is incredibly potent once you stack it all together, leaving group mode off, leaving camera aim retargeting off. You basically have this ability to lock onto people whenever you want to, and kind of, do what you want. You can lock onto them just running by them and then be like, oh yeah, I guess I'll heal that guy, or not, and you don't actually show that you're trying to heal anybody to a PvP enemy. You don't have to worry about dodging or blocking. You can still scroll through people, right? So you see me scrolling through people very easily right here. And keep in mind, you don't actually have the little animation, the little blue light, if you're scrolling through people without a spell out, right? You actually have to have a spell out to see it visually. So I think that covers it for the settings for healer targeting. If you guys have any questions or comments, let me know below, and thanks for watching.